Kevin,
Shaun.
did you see all the sirens over next to the preschool this morning?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, it was crazy. Apparently, a toddler was resisting arrest. Welcome to the Elementary Podcast. We're your hosts, Shaun Brady and
Kevin Clyde.
two sixth grade teachers. Welcome to another episode of Elementary. Today, we're going to be talking about me.
So, Shaun, my first question for you, why are you here?
That was a very dramatic pause. Why am I here? Okay. Well, my story begins very, very young. I decided as a small child, and here's how small I was. I remember when I made the decision, I was so short that I was sitting in the back seat of my parents' car and my feet didn't hit the floor.
I remember those days.
Yes, exactly. So that's the reference I have for it. But I remember I was sitting in the back seat of my parents' car. I think my mom went in to grab some groceries real quick, and I thought about what she did for a living. She was a teacher. And I thought about what my dad did for a living. He was a teacher.
Yeah, what did they teach?
My mom taught high school. She taught business and computers, and my dad taught elementary school. And he mostly stayed in fifth grade, but he also taught sixth grade. Likes to claim that because he did a few splits along the way.
Oh, wow. Hats off to anyone who can do a fifth, sixth split, any split. Shaun has done a couple.
I've done a couple. And crazy enough, my dad actually loved doing the splits. Like he preferred doing splits because you got to keep the fifth graders that you had the year before and, have them in your class for sixth grade. And he really loved the opportunities that provided. But anyways, back to the story. So I was sitting in the back seat of the car and I just thought, oh my gosh. Well, first I thought it would be so fun. And then second, I thought I would be so good at it. And so I remember promising myself as a small kid that one day I would be an elementary school teacher. And it was a promise because I remember being worried that I would back out or I would forget or I wouldn't do it.
No way.
And so I was, as a small kid, I was like, no, man, you have to do it. You have to be an elementary school teacher. Promise yourself that right now.
Now, what made you think that, what was your idea that you would be a good teacher? What was your data for that?
I'm not 100% sure. I just remember with my limited experience in school, watching what they did, hearing about what they did, and then, of course, going to school and experiencing it for myself. And I could visualize myself in front of a classroom, visualize myself working with kids. And whenever I went to school, I had all of these ideas swirling around my head of, how would you do that? Or how would you do this? It's like...
That's interesting, yeah.
Now, having said that, let me tell you the first thing that came to mind after I made that commitment. It was a tremendous sense of inadequacy. Because the first thing that came to mind is, oh no, if I'm a teacher, I've got to sit in front of a room filled with students and I have to read to them.
Oh boy.
Because that's what my teachers did. They did read alouds. And I couldn't read that well. I was a very slow reader. I was afraid I would jumble over my words. I'm like, how am I going to be able to read in front of all those kids? But even as a small child, I remember thinking, well, I'll be better at reading by then. But I just didn't know how that was going to happen. How was I, as a small child, going to be able to progress to a level that I could read in front of an audience?
You were already thinking, am I going to be a good enough reader in front of a classroom of
100%. Because you know what I think it was? My teacher was reading a book called The Fairy Rebel.
Yeah.
And she did such a good job at describing what it's like to be small. I remember her one of the characters in the book described what a teardrop tasted like. It was kind of salty. But the reason I bring that detail up is because I remember thinking about that as a small child, and I'm like, how am I ever going to read so well that the kids are going to, be drawn into the story like I was? Because the way I was reading it was like word for word, like, and then the little fairy tasted the sadness of the teardrop or whatever it was from that book. And I just knew I couldn't do it as good as her. Right.
Yeah, just give it that expression.
That's where the growth mindset comes in, though.
No way.
Didn't learn about that till later.
Well, yeah, I can't think of another first or second grader I know whose motivation for reading was in order to perform as a teacher in front of a classroom.
Yep.
That's pretty amazing. Did your parents ever put any ideas directly or indirectly into your head about becoming a teacher?
I didn't really tell them about this decision for a long time, to be honest with you. I don't remember. I think it was when I was in high school, I started really talking about it. See, I didn't know that I wanted to 100% be an elementary school teacher back then. I knew I wanted to teach. I started thinking, well, what about high school? But oh my gosh, I watched what my mom did, and she was a fabulous teacher. And I'm prejudiced. I love my mom. I feel like she did a great job, but man, she worked so hard. I remember she would get up before all of us, and she would be working, and then we would go. I would do my clubs after high school, and I would finish all the clubs, and she was still in her classroom working. Sometimes, and this was the fun part, and it could be cool for another episode, sometimes we would stay in the school till, I swear, midnight.
Wow.
Because it was way back in the day, and we had a great relationship with the janitors, and she was still working.
No way.
Yeah, and she worked in a high school that was like 100 years old, and we'd be wandering the high school, and there's like this basement and stuff like that.
Oh, man.
It was so spooky. Like the high school was supposed to be haunted. But back to my point, I just saw how hard she worked.
Yeah.
And I was like, do I really want to do that, to be a high school teacher? Now, my dad worked hard, but he didn't stay at the school. Like his philosophy was, I will give my students my absolute best while I'm at work.
Yeah.
But when I'm off work, I want to be with my family. And my mom did that too when we weren't in high school. But when we were in high school, she was like, hey, I'm with you guys. I'm just still here in the classroom. But my dad, he would come home and he'd focus on us. He'd put us on the couch and we'd take turns doing homework with him, take us for rides. I really loved that about him.
Yeah.
But I just felt like, okay, I can do that. Maybe as an elementary school teacher, I can give my class my absolute best and then just leave it there and then come home and focus on my family.
Gotcha.
And also there was this really cool thing that you get to teach all kinds of subjects in elementary school.
Amen.
Right? You got math, you got science, language, arts, social studies, and the list goes on. So that was super appealing too.
So, Shaun, I'm wondering, would any of your elementary school teachers be surprised that you became an elementary teacher?
Okay. So there's a lot of things to my story, but you might be interested. I actually had a conversation with one of my elementary school teachers in my head just the other day. And I'll tell you what I said. I said to her, I'm all like, all right, I won't say her name because I don't want to like.
Right.
But I said, Miss So-and-so, you'll be so happy today because I had a very difficult day. That sounds super negative, but I've thought about her a lot. She was my teacher when I was in 5th grade, and I wasn't a good student for her. As a 10-year-old kid, trying to figure out how to be popular, trying to figure out how to be the cool kid, and unfortunately, part of that was to be rebellious and rude to the teacher.
Right.
Well, the other day, I think a month ago, I said this out loud. I had a really rough day. Like the kids were just hard, and that's just the way our job is sometimes. And I was really feeling down, and so I just said, you'll be happy to know that I'm getting it too, right? I know I was hard for you, but man, they're hard for me, so I'm getting it back. I think she'd be like, you see how it is, Shaun? You see what I had to go through? And yes, I absolutely do. But it's helpful to have that experience on both ends, because now after I've taught school for so long, I can see where she was coming from. I can see, okay, I kind of judged her harshly as I was growing up. I'm like, well, I would have handled that differently, or I would have handled that differently.
Right.
But we're all humans. I mean, we do make mistakes, and we don't handle it 100% perfect each time. So I do think, to answer your question, she would be super surprised. I think most of the teachers I had in elementary school would have never guessed that I would have become a teacher. Her specifically in 5th grade, because I was rebellious and I got in trouble a lot.
Yeah.
But before that, I was this quiet, shy kid that usually just, I got accused of daydreaming a lot. I would zone out in class and I'd be thinking about all kinds of things. They would tell my parents. And that's not somebody who you would think about, some of this quiet, shy kid in the classroom daydreaming all the time, as wanting to be in front of a group of people, even if it is children, and talking all day.
Right.
So great question.
Yeah, thank you. So you finished high school.
Yes, sir.
Still with that same desire?
Okay. I still wanted to be it, but I was afraid. I was afraid of what other people would think, specifically the females.
Right.
Because, as you know, we don't make a ton of money as teachers, at least in our state. And so I wanted the girls that I was interested in to look at me as a provider, like somebody that would be able to provide a decent living for them. But what I was hearing from all kinds of people, and most of them were teachers, because I would say, I would go up to teachers and I'd be like, oh yeah, I want to be a teacher too. And they would try and talk me out of it. And it was kind of a buzzkill. And I remember one teacher even came up to me, he's like, really? You don't want to be a teacher? I mean, what are you going to have? This
is one of your high school teachers?
No, this is just a teacher I happen to know.
Okay.
Yeah, he was like, what are you going to have when you graduate? And I remember he said it this exact way. He's all like, you won't even be able to afford to buy a house.
Yeah, that's hard.
And well, now it's hard for anybody to buy a house here in Utah. Everything's so expensive. But this is over 20 years ago. He was telling me this, and it was a little more affordable. But I was like, I can't even buy a house. And so, yeah, I had second thoughts, because I was afraid of what other people would think, especially the girls. If I'm being 100% honest, I'm like, well.
Yeah. Well, you grew up with, two parents who were both teachers.
Yep.
And, that's a double teacher salary, which is still,
It was decent.
Is that enough for,
but
how many kids in your family?
There's 5 children.
Right.
But for when we were small kids, my mom didn't work. So we were surviving on a single teacher salary for a long time.
See, now that's one of those Herculean tasks. If anyone can do that,
well, and
raise a family on a single teacher salary, that is amazing.
To my parents' credit, they made it work so well that I didn't feel like I was going without. I remember the powdered milk days. I remember going to lots of parks and having peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. That's what my mom would do with us.
Right.
And I actually look back on those days incredibly fondly. It's like they couldn't afford hardly anything when I was a small kid. Because, and a little bit of reason for that is my parents had 5 kids in just about 5 years. Wow. So on a single teacher salary. Because what happened is they worked forever to adopt my older brother, and thank goodness we got him. They adopted my older brother, James, and then my sister came shortly after. So they're within a year of each other. And then after that, they had twins, which I was one of the twins.
Oh, my goodness.
Then they had my younger brother. And so all of a sudden they went from no kids to a bunch of little whippersnappers that they had mouths to feed and they had to provide for. So there was a lot of budgeting and a lot of dollar stretching. And fortunately for us, they were very creative at entertaining us and providing opportunities for us. So I always felt rich. And my dad was really good at budgeting, on a single teacher salary.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Again, hats off to anyone who has been a part of that in the past or who does that now. My dad's he was in the military for a bit. He didn't have to serve in action in Vietnam, but he gets a lot of veterans discounts and things like that.
Nice.
I think any family on a teacher salary should get some major perks.
Well, fortunately, my dad was also a veteran, so we had a few veteran discounts too, which could have helped.
Yeah.
It's cool. Our dads are probably the same vintage, same era.
Yeah, I think so.
That's interesting. But yeah, so it was tough on the single teacher salary.
You guys made it though.
We made
Working together, yeah.
But I did learn that there wasn't much money to be had in education. if I wanted to be seen as a successful high roller, which I did want to be seen as, I wanted to be seen as that, especially by the girls I was interested in, then maybe education wasn't the spot for me.
Yeah.
Because I was insecure about not making much money, what I would do is when somebody would ask me what I was going into, I'd be like, I'm going into education, but I'm going to be a principal someday.
Yeah.
That was the first thing I remember saying.
Mm-hmm.
Or they'd be like, so what are you going into? And I'd be like, oh, I'm going to be a teacher, but I also do this. I was always interested in multimedia stuff. So I'd say like, I'm going to be a teacher, but I'm doing multimedia, so I can provide for you if you're interested. That was the subliminal message. And then, later on, I got my real estate license. And honestly, a big reason I really wanted that real estate license is because I wanted something in my hand that I could show to people, oh, I'm going to be a teacher, but I'm also a real estate agent.
Right.
I can do this. And I'm kind of ashamed to say that. I probably should have just handled it differently and been like, I'm going to be a teacher, and I'm proud of it.
Right.
In an ideal world, we would always be genuine and self-confident, but unfortunately, I wasn't in that regards.
Yeah, but by the same token, I think that's understandable. Again, you are trying to be a provider, right? You're trying to come across as someone who can provide for a family, and so a lot of teachers do have the side gigs, the summer hustles. Mm-hmm. They'll do things. I remember my sixth grade teacher was a guy, and he worked at a department store, I think, most evenings during the week.
Cool.
So, but is that?
I'm saying cool. Like,
I know.
Poor dude's probably dead tired.
Oh boy, yeah. Boy. You finish one shift and you come home and eat, and then you got another shift. Oof. That's now that I think about it. So, what would you have said? Is that what you would have said differently? And I guess
I just wish I was more confident. Not making up excuses. Mm-hmm. I something that fed into that, and I don't want to sound like a pity party, but there was a girl that I really liked for a long time. And I remember she asked me what I was going into, what I was going to be.
Yeah.
And I told her I want to be a teacher. And I remember she muttered under her breath, she said, "That's it?" And boy, it hurt my ego.
Yeah.
I don't know why I didn't add the other stuff in. Maybe I did. Maybe all I remember is just her muttering, "That's it," under her breath. But I think one of the biggest obstacles to me becoming a teacher was just getting that confidence and getting over myself a bit, to not worry about whether people thought I was a good enough provider or, I don't know, successful. Yeah, I just didn't feel like I would have that. So I felt like I needed to say I was doing something else on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't have done that, Klein.
Well,
live and learn.
Yeah, for people listening, and maybe there are some guys who are in the program right now doing the teacher training or who are thinking about it. If you do have a side hustle, like you do multimedia, you have this marketable skill you can do after hours. I don't suppose there's anything wrong with saying that.
Oh, no.
But it's just maybe using that as a compensation rather than hey, I do these two things. I teach, I love it, wouldn't trade it for anything. But to supplement my income, I sell. I have a newspaper route, or
exactly.
I do door-to-door sale, something. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was just the attitude I had for it.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with having two things, but just my frame of mind where I'm like, oh, I feel like I got to say something, because we do have multiple interests, and it's not bad to go after it. Now, I will say this. Once I became a little bit more mature about things, and I started doing real estate, I made it into a joke. They'd be like, so what do you do for a living? And I'm like, oh, I'm a teacher, but I'm also a real estate agent. And they're like, really? You do real estate? And I would joke and say, yeah, I do real estate to support my teaching habit.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
So I tried to turn it into a bit of a joke. And that's true. I do like real estate. Mm-hmm. But my true love and what I've wanted to do since I was a small kid was be in the classroom. And can I just say, I am so grateful for the opportunity that for the last 15 years, I've been able to live that dream. Mm-hmm. It really is amazing how wonderful it is to be in the United States. and I'll brag on my country for a little bit because I don't know who's listening to it, but just to be able to see a dream that you had as a small child realized and to do something that I frankly love. Like every day, it's challenging. Some days I'm talking to teachers in the past in my brain and saying, yeah, today was a rough day, but what a wonderful opportunity.
So there you are in your program, your education program, and you start teaching. Was there ever any temptation for you to want to go back into those, like actually stop teaching and do real estate full time, or pursue something, any multimedia? No,
never. I mean, the nice thing about this is I always thought that I would like it, and it turned out that when I started doing it, I loved it.
Nice.
I do remember, and maybe I'll close with this story, and we can add more to it later, but I do remember when I first started teaching, and maybe you can relate to this. You can, I'm sure, and a lot of parents can relate to this, but I'd been planning on being a teacher for a long time, so I'd worked with kids all in my neighborhood ever since they were small up to older, and I was so excited because the kids in my classroom, I had known for a long time. I've been helping them and working with them and practicing for the day when I could be a teacher. And so I was so excited to have them. But I remember I was less than a month in. Mm-hmm. And one day I came to school and they did something that got me really upset. Like I was so angry. And so I remember I yelled at my class. I don't even remember what it was about, but I yelled at them. And I remember they were stunned silent. And afterwards, I felt horrible about the way I behaved. Like, I was like, oh, man, I've known these kids since they were like 5 years old. Wow. And I just yelled at them, and they probably hate me, and they don't want to be in my class, and I'm a failure as a teacher. I remember I came back to the school because my dad lives in the same neighborhood I do, and I was working on some stuff, and he and I are good buddies, so he was helping me correct stuff, but I felt horrible inside. And I went back to the faculty restroom that I've been using for the last 15 years. So I see this spot and I think about this.
Right.
I think about this. I went to the faculty restroom and I just sat on the floor and I started to cry.
Wow.
Because I thought that I had made the wrong decision. And I felt like a complete failure as a teacher. I was like, you're like a month in and you cannot handle this. You've disappointed those kids. You're not good at your job. All these negative thoughts came flooding in, and I just felt horrible inside. Well, I remember that night. I went home. I talked to my dad about it. I feel horrible. I'm a terrible teacher, but sometimes just getting a good night's sleep helps.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, so what did he say?
Well, I just remember him. He was shocked that I was so upset. Like,
okay, honestly, that's my reaction too. It's like, yeah, I mean, I taught high school English, so I would yell at kids not yell at kids all the time, but you raise your voice, right?
Well,
help us understand this.
He's like, what is going? It's like, why are you so upset? And I was obsessed with was swing dancing at that age. Mm-hmm. And so every Tuesday and Thursday, like clockwork, I would go swing dancing. And I was so upset. This was a Thursday night, which was the best nights to go because a ton of people would go. I was so upset that I wouldn't even go dancing that night. He's like, you're really that upset? I remember that was his reaction. I'm like, yeah, I'm just so down. And I didn't know how to handle it. So I didn't go dancing that night, which was unheard of because, like I say, I loved it. And I got a good night's rest, and I came back to work the next day.
Mm-hmm. Good.
And here's the kicker. Yeah, good, right? Here's the kicker. Those kids were so good for me. They were like, I'd do an attention signal, and they would sit up straight, and they would be quiet, and they would totally listen to me. And I was like, what? They were so good for me the next day. And I remember I just had a conversation with them. I'm like, guys, yesterday was rough. And then one of the girls that I'd known since she was 5 years old, she spoke up and she said, yeah, it was horrible. And I said, I'm sorry I reacted the way I did, but can we, work on this together? And they were good little kids. For, I swear, 2 weeks, I had solid angels.
Wow.
And I always snicker at that because, sometimes I guess I mean, we should always control our tempers.
Mm-hmm.
And we should always handle everything perfectly, whether you're a parent or a teacher. But we're not perfect. We're human, and sometimes we make mistakes. But I learned that, sometimes there's also happy little accidents.
Yeah.
Because then the kids know that, okay, there's certain boundaries that we shouldn't go to or cross or mess with. And if we do our part and he does his, everybody's happier. So I kind of snicker about that. But yeah, I think that's a prominent memory that sticks out. And anybody who's a first-year teacher, buckle up, because you're gonna come into the classroom with all of these wonderful ideas and things, and you're gonna want to see them come to fruition. But it'll be discouraging for you, because it's like drinking from a. Most of us get discouraged. It's like drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah,
Thank you. Fire hose. And so it can be very difficult, but if you can just recognize that we all start that way, and it is a constant process to try and learn from your mistakes and come back the next day and try again, it is an incredibly rewarding profession. And for you first-year teachers out there, get ready for your second year, because it's going to be awesome. You're going to show up your second year and you'll be like, oh my gosh, not everything is brand new. And I have all these wonderful ideas of things that I want to try. And I think if you're like most teachers I've known, and if you're like me, you're going to have a wonderful time. So recognize that first year might be a little bit rough, but the second year is going to be amazing. And if you can stick it out, you're going to have a wonderful career.
Yeah. Or a bit better in my case, and then a bit better, and then a bit better. Yeah.
Yeah, a little, yeah.
Definitely there's that incremental improvement.
Amen.
But, yeah, first year's tough. I'm glad you've stuck it out for 15
Thank
years.
You, sir.
A lot of people are glad this guy has stuck it out for 15 years. And sorry, Shaun, I just, I mean, it's impressive to me that you yelling at your students once would have had such a big impact on you.
It did, man.
That just shows, I think, the size of your heart. I have a different, slightly different approach. I definitely, and maybe that's a big conversation. Maybe we'll put that in the next episode. One of the good things about these stories is that they will bring up teaching points that I think are conversations worth having.
Absolutely.
But congratulations for 15 years of being the influence you are. And I know I teach next door to Shaun, and I see him taking kids out all the time whom, bless their hearts, I would be yelling at them. But he pulls them out and he sits down and he counsels with them. You can see him talking with them. Okay, what's the problem? How are you going to solve it? And he helps these kids, just work through things that are too difficult for them to handle on their own. They don't have the skills for it. And rather than just kind of smushing that their behavior, Shaun builds them up and gives them the skills, the confidence that they need to handle their problems. So
thanks, brother.
Keep it up, man.
Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Well, I think with that, maybe we'll call it an episode and sign off.